By the time the room went quiet, every camera in that city hall was pointed at him. Marcus Hale stood alone at the microphone, shirt sleeves rolled up a thick folder clutched in his hand like a life raft. The mayor sat stone-faced on the raised dais. The city's most powerful contractor lounged beside him, lips curled in a smirk that said he'd already won. Marcus's voice shook on the first word, but he didn't back away. Behind him, he could feel rows of eyes on his neck, reporters, angry residents, city officials who remembered him only as that disgraced engineer. In the very back row, his 10-year-old son, Ben, sat on the edge of his seat, small hands gripping the plastic chair, watching his father like this was the Super Bowl and the world's verdict all at once. On the projector screen, a familiar blueprint glowed in cold blue lines. The new Riverside Transit Hub. Their pride. Their big announcement. It was his design. Down to the smallest load-bearing beam. The same design they'd sworn under oath he had falsified. The same plan they'd used to destroy his name and shove him out of the profession forever. "You've all seen this drawing," Marcus said, voice steadier now. "You just don't know who actually drew it, or how many lies it took to bury the truth." The contractor's smirk faded. The mayor shifted in his seat. And just over Marcus's shoulder, in the front row, a woman in a dark green blazer, the city's newest infrastructure commissioner, leaned forward. Recognition flashed in her eyes. She knew this drawing too. She knew him. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Marcus Hale was not supposed to be standing at any microphone anymore. A few months earlier, he was just the guy in gray coveralls pushing a squeaky floor buffer down the hallways of a downtown Cleveland office tower. Once upon a time, he'd been one of the city's youngest senior structural engineers, the kind of man who could look at a bridge and read it like a book. These days, most people saw him as the night janitor, the man you nod at, then forget. He woke up at 4:45 every morning in a cramped two-bedroom apartment that always smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and burnt toast. He'd tiptoe past the pull-out couch where his son slept on school nights when his ex-wife's shift ran late at the hospital. Ben would be curled up with a notebook, sketches of skyscrapers and roller coasters scattered across the blanket, proof that math and imagination ran strong in that little body. Marcus packed 2 lunches at the chipped kitchen counter. One for Ben, peanut butter apple slices, a note that always ended with, "Proud of you." One for himself, whatever leftovers he could scrape together before the rent check cleared. By 7, he'd walked Ben to the bus stop in the gray Ohio dawn and started his first job of the day, maintenance at the tower. His second job came after 5 p.m., when the office lights dimmed and the building emptied. He took a short bus across town to a community center where he checked boilers, patched drywall, and fixed the wobbly basketball hoop so the kids could dunk without crashing to the floor. Only when Ben was with him on those nights did it feel like more than survival, teaching his son how to tighten bolts, how to listen for the rattle of a loose pipe. Little pieces of a life he'd once thought he'd be living in a nicer zip code. The fall from grace had been brutal and public. Accusations of falsified safety calculations on a riverfront parking structure. A rushed investigation. A hearing where his firm and the city pointed the finger at him, calling it criminal negligence. His name splashed across the local news like a warning label. No charges stuck. But no one wanted to hire the man the newspaper had named the engineer who nearly brought a garage down. So he scrubbed floors, fixed toilets, and watched other men in sharp suits walk past blueprints in the lobby display cases, concepts that looked suspiciously like ideas he'd once sketched on napkins in conference rooms. He told himself it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was Ben. Homework done, sneakers that fit enough gas in the car to get to school and back. His values had narrowed to something simple and fierce: keep his kids safe, keep a roof overhead, never lie to the boy about who his father really was. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, he trudged home from the community center, shoes soaked, back aching. He tossed his keys on the table and flipped on the small TV to drown out the hum of the fridge. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. City unveils bold new Riverside Transit Hub, the anchor announced, beaming. Behind her, a digital rendering rotated slowly. A sweeping roofline, staggered concrete supports, a distinctive open-air atrium that let the river wind light through the structure. Marcus froze in the middle of the room, breath trapped in his chest. He'd drawn that atrium, those supports, that exact roofline, and the man standing at the podium in the news clip taking credit for the vision. It was the same contractor who'd sworn 8 years earlier that Marcus's calculations could not be trusted. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at the small kitchen table long after the TV flickered into static, staring at the paused image he'd taken with his phone, a screenshot of the new transit hub rendering. His rendering. Every contour, every angle, every solution he'd once defended in front of a conference room full of colleagues who'd later testified against him. By dawn, when the hallway light flicked on and Ben padded out, rubbing his eyes, Marcus forced a smile and shoved his phone into his pocket. Breakfast first. Toast, eggs, orange slices. Routine kept the world steady for his son. He ruffled the boy's hair, admired how he was already growing into his own lanky frame, then walked him to the bus stop as if nothing earth-shaking had happened overnight. But at work, the shift felt immediate. At the office tower where he ran maintenance on the morning shift, there was a sudden coolness in the air that had nothing to do with the AC. The property manager, a sharp-tongued woman named Lorna, waved him over the moment he clocked in. She was surrounded by 2 men in suits, visitors from the city's procurement office judging by their badges. "Marcus," she said, "all business, the city inspectors will be doing a walkthrough today. Try to stay out of sight unless someone calls you." It wasn't a request. It was a dismissal. One of the inspectors gave Marcus a once-over, eyes lingering on the janitor's badge clipped to his chest. The look wasn't hostile. Worse, pitying. The kind someone gives to a dog limping by the roadside. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly, stepping back. He had no way of knowing yet that his name was circulating again, drifting back through the city's bureaucratic maze like smoke after a long dormant fire. Someone somewhere had recognized his design on the news and started whispering old stories in the right or wrong ears. By noon, whispers traveled faster than elevator cars. He felt them follow him down hallways as he repaired a faulty air vent. Secretaries looked away when he passed. A group of interns stared a beat too long when he entered the break room, their voices dropping to a hush. One of them muttered something under his breath, something Marcus barely caught. "That's the guy who messed up that garage years ago." He kept his hand steady as he filled his water bottle. Years of practice. Years of swallowing humiliation so Ben wouldn't see his father break. But inside, the old wound pulsed with heat. At the community center that evening, the shadows stretched long across the basketball court, where he patched a crack in the floor. Kids chased each other past him, sneakers squeaking, laughter echoing. Normally, the noise calmed him. Today, it throbbed like static. He checked his phone twice to make sure Ben had gotten home safely from school. Text from his ex-wife. Parents were talking. "Call me later." He didn't call. Not yet. Not until his hands stopped shaking. Meanwhile, the new infrastructure commissioner, the woman in the green blazer, who'd leaned forward in the City Hall audience, was stirring things up in her own circles. She wanted to know more about the janitor, who seemed to know his way around a blueprint, and the contractor who'd looked less than thrilled to see him. Rumors have a way of circling back to the people they bruise. The next morning, Marcus was repairing a leaking faucet on the 18th floor when the contractor himself walked into the restroom. Lincoln Morris, a man whose shadow in this city stretched farther than most buildings he constructed. Broad shoulders, polished shoes, watch worth more than Marcus's truck. "Well," Morris said, letting the door swing shut behind him. "If it isn't Cleveland's fallen star." Marcus didn't respond. His wrench turned slowly, deliberately. Morris smirked. "Must be something, huh? Seeing your little drawing on the news last night." Marcus's breath stalled. So he knew. "You kept that concept close to your chest back then," Morris continued. "Told everyone we needed innovation. Shame you couldn't back it up with sound calculations." There it was, the lie sharpened to a blade. Marcus rose, wiping his hands on a rag. "Those calculations were correct." Morris stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You want my advice? Let it go. Some reputations can't be resurrected. Better to mop floors quietly than stir up trouble." Then he walked out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and cheap intimidation hanging in the air. For the first time in years, Marcus slammed the wrench onto the counter. The metallic clang jarred him with its violence. That afternoon, when he picked up Ben from school, the boy looked uneasy. "Dad, Mrs. Porter said she wants to talk to you tomorrow morning. Something about enrollment requirements." Marcus's stomach dropped. Enrollment requirements usually meant only one thing: complaints. Someone had said something. Someone always did when old stories resurfaced. He forced a smile anyway. "No big deal, buddy. Grown-up stuff." But the boy wasn't fooled. People were whispering at recess. "About you." He stopped walking. Sunlight flickered through bare branches overhead, casting shifting patterns on Ben's worried face. "What were they saying? That you messed up some building and people almost died?" Marcus inhaled sharply. "No one died," he said firmly. "And I didn't do what they said." The boy nodded slowly, trusting but hurt. Hurt that kids had used his father's name like ammunition. Marcus held his son's backpack with one hand, his heart with the other. "Hey, you didn't do anything wrong." Ben's small voice trembled. "I know, but I don't like when they talk about you like that." Neither did Marcus. The next morning, the meeting with the school administrator confirmed what his gut had been warning him. Funding for the after-school STEM program Ben loved was being reassessed. Not cut, just reassessed, pending parental background clarifications. Marcus stared blankly at the administrator's polished desk. "My background hasn't changed in 8 years." She offered a thin smile. "Some concerns have been raised in light of recent media attention." Media attention. The news clip, the rendering, the whispers. It had all connected faster than he imagined. He walked out of the office with the kind of quiet fury that shakes a man from the inside out. By Thursday, his supervisor at the community center took him aside. "We're just tightening budgets, Marcus," the man said, not meeting his eyes. "Cutting a few shifts, temporarily." Marcus nodded, even though he knew it wasn't budgets. It was reputation. It was the story that refused to stay buried. Walking home in the cold Cleveland dusk, his breath turning to fog, he felt the walls pushing in from all sides. His income shrinking, his son hurting, his past strangling his present. But it wasn't until he got home that night that the pressure finally hit its peak. A thin envelope was taped to his apartment door. No return address. His name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Direct. Venomous. Stay away from the Transit Hub project if you know what's good for you. Some of us haven't forgotten what you did. At the bottom, in smaller type. No second chances for men like you. Marcus gripped the letter until the paper crumpled. His pulse roared. Behind him, he heard small footsteps. Ben stood in the doorway, backpack still on eyes wide. "Dad, what's wrong?" Marcus turned, hiding the letter behind his leg. But the boy had already seen the tremor in his hands, the way his jaw clenched. Nothing in the world cut deeper than the fear in his son's voice. He forced a breath. "Everything's okay, buddy." Ben didn't believe him. And Marcus, staring down at the letter, feeling the weight of 8 years pressing onto this one terrible moment, knew something had shifted. They weren't just whispering anymore. They were warning him, pushing him, trying to force him back into the shadows. But even as the fear rose like a tide, another feeling rose with it, quiet, coiled, long suppressed. This wasn't over. Not anymore. Something was coming, and for the first time in years, Marcus was done running from it. Marcus barely slept after finding the letter. He sat in the dim apartment long after Ben fell asleep, the single bulb above the kitchen table flickering like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. The warning note lay in pieces in the trash can, but its message whispered through every corner of the room. Stay away. No second chances. All night he told himself he wouldn't let it get under his skin. He'd been threatened before, humiliated before, knocked down in ways that should have ended him. But this time felt different. This time the stakes had grown teeth. This time they'd crept into his son's school, his job, his home. By the time dawn bled into the sky, he'd made up his mind. He would look the threat in the eye. Not to win, not even to confront, but to understand what he was up against. Cleveland's Riverside district was quiet that early in the morning. Fog rolled off the river, like breath from something sleeping beneath the surface. Steel girders from the unfinished transit hub reached into the sky, dark silhouettes against the soft light. The site was fenced off, plastered with warning signs, but construction crews would arrive soon, and Marcus wanted to see it before the noise began. He stood outside the chain-link fence, hands deep in his jacket pockets, watching the massive skeleton of the building rise from the mist. He knew every angle, every load path, every place the design carried strain. It was like staring at a memory carved into steel, a memory someone else had claimed as their own. "You shouldn't be here." The voice snapped through the quiet. Marcus turned. A security guard he'd never seen before approached, hand hovering near his radio. "Just looking," Marcus said. "It's public property. It's a construction zone," the guard replied sharply. "Move on." Marcus nodded and stepped back, but even from the sidewalk he kept watching the structure. Something felt wrong. A diagonal support on the eastern stairwell, one he'd designed to be reinforced at 3 junction points, looked thinner than he remembered. Almost improvised. His breath caught. No competent engineer would have altered that reinforcement without recalculating the entire load distribution. Not unless they were cutting corners or hiding something. He fished a small notebook from his pocket habit from an old life he could never fully abandon and sketched what he saw. Numbers cascaded down the margin as he ran calculations from memory. When he finished, his chest tightened. The stairwell structure wasn't just off. It was unsafe. One overloaded shift of weight and the entire section could buckle. A horn blared somewhere behind him, jolting him from the thought. Workers were arriving, traffic thickening. He looked back at the vulnerable stairwell and felt a prickling down his spine. Today, someone could get hurt. He walked away, though every instinct screamed to go back. But an hour later at the office tower, where he worked his morning shift, he learned just how quickly fate was moving. "Emergency call?" Lorna barked from behind the front desk as firefighters rushed past the lobby doors. Transit hub site. Stairwell incident. The wrench slipped from Marcus's hand. "What happened?" he asked, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "Partial collapse," she said. "Workers trapped." He was already running. He didn't think about consequences. He didn't think about warnings. He didn't think about the fact that he'd be trespassing on a city-run site. He thought about a younger version of himself standing in a hearing room swearing calculations were correct, while everyone rolled their eyes. He thought about his son asking why people talked badly about him. He thought about how the world had let him become the guy who messed up. He wouldn't let innocent people pay for someone else's shortcuts. Not again. Sirens wailed through the streets as he sprinted toward the riverfront. Smoke or dust, he couldn't tell which, rose above the construction site. A growing crowd gathered near the fence's phones, out voices anxious and frantic. Police had cordoned off the area, but Marcus pushed through anyway. A firefighter blocked him. "Sir, you can't!" "There's a structural fault in that stairwell," Marcus said, chest heaving. "I know how it was supposed to be reinforced. I can tell you where it's weak and where it's safe to enter." The firefighter hesitated. "You an engineer, I was." Another burst of shouting came from inside the site. A foreman ran toward the emergency team. "We've got 2 workers pinned under a collapsed landing. We can't get the stabilization beams in place. The whole frame is shifting." Marcus swallowed hard. The calculations were already unfolding in his mind. Every second mattered. "Let me help," he said. "If you go in blind, you'll bring down the entire east side." The chief stepped forward. A hardened man with soot-stained gloves and no time for debate. "How do you know that?" "Because I designed it," Marcus answered, voice steady. "I know where it can hold and where it won't." The chief stared at him, sizing him up, the janitor's uniform. The worn boots, the man who clearly didn't belong on a construction site. Then another groan came from the structure metal twisting under its own weight. The chief made his call. "Get him a helmet." Inside the site, dust choked the air. Screams echoed off concrete. The stairwell leaned precariously, its landing twisted like paper. A beam balanced at a dangerous angle above the trapped workers. Marcus took in the scene in a single sweep. "We need to relieve weight from the north joint. If that gives everything comes down." He guided the firefighters to place temporary supports, using whatever scrap steel and wood were nearby. Each command came from a place deeper than training. It came from memory, from instinct, from years of loving a job that had betrayed him. A loud creak made everyone freeze. The beam above the trapped workers shifted an inch. "Move," someone shouted, but Marcus didn't move. He lunged forward, wedging a support column beneath the sagging beam before it could swing downward. His shoulder took the hit when the beam dropped, pain exploding through his arm, but the support held. The beam stopped. The landing stopped. The structure held. "Cut them out!" Marcus yelled, voice raw. The firefighters dragged the workers free. One conscious, one barely breathing, both alive. As they carried the injured men to safety, Marcus stepped back, chest-burning sweat and dust streaking his face. His arm throbbed, likely bruised or worse. But he didn't flinch. He kept scanning the structure until he was certain no one else was inside. When they finally guided him out of the site, the crowd erupted not in applause, but in stunned silence. People stared. Cameras filmed. Reporters whispered his name. The chief approached him. "You saved lives today." You know that Marcus didn't answer. He looked past the chief, past the cameras, past the gathering reporters. He saw someone standing near the barricade, the woman in the green blazer, the new commissioner. Her expression wasn't shock, it was revelation. She had just watched a man the city had labeled incompetent save an entire crew using knowledge he shouldn't have had unless the story about him had been a lie. And she suddenly understood that the blueprint everyone celebrated wasn't the contractor's vision. It was his. Marcus didn't know it yet, but this moment dust-covered, trembling heart pounding had just shifted the balance of power, and the people who'd spent years burying his name had just watched him rise from the rubble they tried to crush him with. Dust clung to Marcus's clothes and hair as he stepped out of the construction site, the entire world narrowing to the pounding in his ears. Firefighters hurried past him with stretchers. Reporters shouted questions he couldn't process. The air smelled like concrete and fear, but beneath it all ran a strange quiet, an almost reverent stillness that followed him wherever he moved. The workers he'd helped rescue were being loaded into ambulances. One of them lifted a trembling hand toward him, eyes glassy with gratitude. Another firefighter clapped Marcus's shoulder as if he'd known him for years, not minutes. But the faces surrounding him, construction crew, bystanders, police, held something else entirely. A dawning realization. This man wasn't who they believed he was, not a janitor, not a disgraced name whispered in low tones. Someone more. The chief approached, helmet under his arm. "We reviewed the footage," he said. "Your calls inside the structure, those weren't guesses. You knew exactly where that thing was going to fold." Marcus's throat tightened, but he said nothing. Adrenaline still buzzed through his limbs, making speech feel like an afterthought. "You saved their lives," the chief continued. "I've been in this job 30 years. I've never seen a civilian do what you just did." A crowd of onlookers pressed closer. Phones rose. Someone murmured, "Is that the guy from the news story?" The engineer Marcus backed away, the attention scraped against old scars. Then he saw her, the woman in the green blazer, winding through the officials with purpose in her steps. The city's new infrastructure commissioner. She stopped a foot from him, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "I saw what you did," she said softly. "Every move you made in there, it was deliberate, precise." Marcus swallowed. "I just did what needed to be done." "No," she said. "You did what someone trained, someone experienced would do, and from what I understand, you don't have a license anymore." He tensed instinctively, bracing for accusation, but her expression softened just slightly. "I've spent the last 20 minutes reviewing the preliminary report from the structural engineers. A stairwell like that doesn't fail unless someone cut corners, yet you knew where the failure point would propagate." "How?" He dropped his eyes. The jacket he wore, still streaked with dust, suddenly felt too tight. "Because I designed the original version of that stairwell, 8 years ago." Her breath caught. The fire trucks idling behind them seemed to fade. "You designed it," Marcus lifted his head, his voice low. "Before I lost my job. Before people decided I was dangerous with a calculator." The commissioner stared at him as if seeing the entire city differently. "Your name is Hale, isn't it?" he nodded. Her next words came slower, weighed with meaning. "I've been reviewing old project archives for weeks trying to understand why this city's engineering department is split between factions. Your name comes up a lot, and always with contradiction." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Yeah, well, contradictions don't pay the rent." Behind her, a familiar shape pushed through the growing crowd. A tall man in a dark overcoat, jaw set so tightly it looked carved from stone. Lincoln Maris, the contractor, whose smirk Marcus had endured just days earlier, now looked like he'd been hollowed out from the inside. Maris, the commissioner, said, her tone turning cool. "You're not supposed to be here yet. This is an active emergency scene." He barely heard her. His attention locked on Marcus' eyes blazing with something ugly. Fear. "How the hell were you inside that site?" Maris snarled. "You don't belong here." Marcus didn't flinch. Neither did the structural failure. People nearby murmured. A cameraman zoomed in. The commissioner stepped between them. "Mr. Maris, we have credible information that the stairwell's reinforcement didn't match approved specifications." Maris stiffened. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." She turned slightly, addressing both of them. "And this janitor knew exactly why it failed before any of our investigators did. That's not normal." Marcus felt dozens of eyes land on him. Heavy, evaluating eyes. "He's dangerous," Maris said quickly. "He's the same man who nearly caused that garage collapse years ago. You can't trust a word he says." Something inside Marcus, something buried under 8 years of exhaustion and self-preservation, finally snapped free. "That garage didn't fail because of my calculations," he said, voice steady as steel. "It failed because they were altered after I submitted them." A hush fell over the site. Even the river seemed to quiet. He continued, not shouting, not pleading, just speaking the truth he'd carried like a stone in his chest. "I flagged a discrepancy. Filed a report questioning the load tolerances. The next thing I knew, I was suspended. And a week later, the city blamed me for a structural issue I never approved." The commissioner's brows pinched. "There's no record of any complaint filed before your suspension." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. Because the man I reported it to," he lifted his chin toward Maris, "is standing right here." Maris's face drained of color. That's a lie. But something had shifted. The firefighters who'd watched Marcus work now looked at Maris with visible suspicion. The foreman who'd called for help earlier stepped closer, jaw tight. Even the reporters sensed blood in the water. "If it's a lie," Marcus said, "then explain why the revised plans for today's structure omitted reinforcement I personally included. Explain why your signature is on every page I never approved." Maris opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And then the commissioner delivered the blow. "I want your entire documentation chain audited," she told Maris. "All 8 years of it," he sputtered. "You don't have that authority." "I do now," she interrupted. "The mayor gave me emergency oversight after the collapse, and I watched this man step into a failing structure and save your workers while you were nowhere to be found." Maris's jaw worked soundlessly. She turned back to Marcus. Her expression was no longer questioning. It was resolute. Respectful. "You're not a janitor," she said quietly. "You're an engineer. And from what I just saw, one of the best this city ever had." The crowd murmured. People who'd ignored him on sidewalks. Workers who'd barely looked at him. Even Lorna, the property manager, who treated him like a piece of furniture, stared at him with dawning horror. Marcus didn't bask in it. He felt no triumph. Only the tired ache of a truth finally dragging itself into daylight. The commissioner stepped closer. "I want to reopen your case, officially, publicly, and I need your help reviewing the integrity of every major structure Maris had a hand in." The words struck him like a physical force. Help. Review. Reopen. 8 years of being silenced, dismissed, erased, and suddenly the city wanted him back at the table. But with the offer came fear, and memory, and the face of his son asking why people talked about him like a villain. "I'm not sure I can go through that again," Marcus murmured. The commissioner lowered her voice. "You don't have to do it alone this time." Behind her, an ambulance door slammed shut. Reporters shouted new questions. Firefighters loaded equipment. The city was already preparing to turn this disaster into a political storm. But for Marcus, everything narrowed to a single hinge point. A choice between letting the truth burn brighter than the lie, or walking away to keep his son safe. The commissioner extended a folder toward him. Inside were forms, contact information, a temporary consultant authorization. "Think about it," she said, "but not too long. We're going to need you." Marcus looked out over the damaged site. The workers recovering in ambulances. The steel bones of the structure that had once lived only in his sketches. And beyond it all, the skyline he had once dreamed of shaping. He took the folder, and the balance of power shifted again. The days that followed moved like a hard winter thaw, slow at first, then all at once. The morning after the collapse, Marcus found himself summoned not by building managers or supervisors, but by the mayor's office. He arrived expecting interrogation, maybe even another attempt to pin blame on the nearest convenient target. Instead, he walked into a room where every person stood when he entered. The chief who'd seen him work inside the failing stairwell shook his hand with both of his. The commissioner introduced him to senior engineers who admitted, some with red faces, that his real role in the city's past projects had been kept from them. And when the mayor thanked him openly for saving lives, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a decade. The weight on his back lighten. Not because life was easier, but because the truth finally had a place at the table. Word of the investigation spread quickly. Morris tried to fight it, but paper trails don't lie, and neither do altered blueprints. What he'd buried years ago surfaced in full daylight. By the end of the week, his firm was suspended from all municipal contracts, and the Ethics Review Board recommended a criminal inquiry. Watching Morris escorted out of a council chamber, shoulders slumped, Marcus didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Some storms you don't celebrate, you simply survive. The commissioner asked him to stay on, as part of the emergency structural review team, a temporary role at first. She offered a salary far higher than anything he'd seen since losing his license, but that wasn't what caught his breath. It was the quiet respect in her voice, the recognition in her eyes that told him this wasn't charity or pity. It was earned. He accepted on one condition, that he'd still be able to walk Ben to the bus stop every morning. She smiled and said, "I think the city can work around that." At Ben's school, things shifted too. The principal, who once kept her distance, pulled Marcus into her office to apologize for premature concerns. She returned Ben's place in the STEM program, this time with a full scholarship sponsored anonymously, though Marcus had a suspicion about the source. When Ben heard the news, he launched into his father with a hug so fierce it nearly knocked Marcus over. "I told them you're the smartest person I know," the boy said. "Now they know it, too." A few weeks passed. His consulting work with the city grew into something steadier, more permanent. He reviewed old structures, flagged potential risks, and taught younger engineers lessons he'd learned the hard way. The commissioner often joined him on site visits, listening more than she spoke. She understood what the city had lost when they cast him aside, and what they'd nearly lost again if he hadn't shown up at that collapsing stairwell. By the end of spring, the engineering board reinstated his license, not with ceremony or speeches, but with a simple envelope in the mail. He held the card between his fingers for a long time before sliding it into his wallet behind a photo of Ben at age 6, smiling with missing front teeth. Summer brought something he didn't expect the chance to design again. A local firm reached out, offering him a role as senior structural designer for a revitalization project on the west side. It wasn't the skyline job he'd dreamed of as a young man, but it was honest work, meaningful work. Work with his name on every page. He took it. And in the evenings, after Ben finished homework and the neighborhood quieted, Marcus sat on the porch of their apartment with a sketch pad balanced on his knee. Sometimes the commissioner joined them, dropping off updated reports or simply checking in. She and Ben had formed their own connection, one built on curiosity and respect. She asked him about school, his inventions, the tiny bridge he built from popsicle sticks that held 5 pounds before snapping clean in half. Marcus watched them together, something easing in his chest each time. He wasn't ready to name what was growing there, but it felt steady, gentle, like the slow return of trust after a long season of doubt. By fall, the Riverside Transit Hub was back under construction this time, with reinforced plans and a new oversight committee that insisted Marcus review every critical load-bearing feature. Workers waved to him when he walked onto the site, not as a rescuer anymore, but as a colleague, someone they trusted with their lives. And late one crisp October afternoon, as he finished marking revisions on a set of revised drawings, the foreman he'd saved during the collapse approached him. The man's arm was still wrapped from surgery, but he smiled wide. "You got a minute?" the foreman asked. "Sure," Marcus said. The man held out a worn hard hat. On the front was a fresh decal Hale Engineering Consultant. "We made this for you," the foreman said. "Figured it was time you stopped borrowing ours." The gesture nearly undid him. When he got home that evening, Ben spotted the hat the moment Marcus walked through the door. "Does this mean you're an engineer again?" the boy asked, hope lighting his face. Marcus knelt beside him. "Yeah, buddy, it does." They held each other for a moment, a long moment, one that felt like coming up for air after years underwater. Life didn't transform overnight, but piece by piece it rebuilt itself stronger this time, shaped by truth instead of fear. Months later, standing on the new transit hub's observation deck, as final inspections wrapped, Marcus looked out across the city that had once cast him out. The commissioner stood beside him, hands in her coat pockets, wind from the river tugging at her hair. "You ever think about where you'd be if you hadn't gone back to that site that morning?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "All the time." She didn't respond right away. Then she said, "I'm glad you showed up when you did. Not just for the city, but for you." He smiled at her small reel. "Me too." The sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the river. Marcus breathed in the cold air, letting it fill him, steady him. Sometimes life doesn't give you clean blueprints to follow. Sometimes it collapses in your hands. But if you keep showing up dust-covered, bruised and tired, something stronger can rise from the wreckage. And on that overlook with the city humming beneath him, and a future finally opening in front of him, Marcus understood the simple truth he'd spent years chasing. A man's worth isn't measured by the titles he loses, but by the courage he refuses to let go.